can do it!
Welcome to Should a Dad Play, a show where dads like us play games, review them, and let you know if you should take a look. My name is CJ Hayze, and today we'll be taking a look at Cyberpunk 2077's 2.0 overhaul and the Phantom Liberty DLC. Cyberpunk 2077 released in 2020, and while expectations and hype around the game were at an all-time high, the release would quickly spiral into one of the worst AAA releases in recent memory. Cut to 2023, and CD Projekt RED has been hard at work making some big changes. With the release of the Cyberpunk anime, as well as a huge in-game overhaul with the release of 2.0, Cyberpunk has been slowly earning back good faith from the gaming community. All of this has led up to the release of Phantom Liberty, Cyberpunk's first DLC. So real quick, something to take note of before we dive into Phantom Liberty. With these sweeping changes that they've made across the game now gives you the option of making a new character to jump right into the DLC with. Now, if you're a returning player, you may want to jump back into your character. I myself found it kind of jarring to try and figure out like what kind of talents I had and kind of match them up with the kind of gear that I was using. So I would recommend probably making a new character and going into the DLC that way, unless you played recently, in which case it might be a little bit easier to get back into the flow of it. But if you are a new player and you really want to do the DLC, do it, but I would highly recommend playing the base game first and, holding off a little bit on the DLC, in my personal opinion. As we do on this channel, we'll go ahead and start with the story for Phantom Liberty. I think right off the bat, the main thing about this story is it really has a different tone than the base game story did. It feels sort of, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but I think a little bit out of nowhere, if I'm being honest. As somebody who liked the original and played it quite a bit, this DLC is great if you want something really fresh, something really new. If you wanted more of the same, I think you may be slightly disappointed. But overall, I think the story is good. I think for people coming into the game who haven't played it, I think they're really going to enjoy it. I think a lot of returning players are going to come back and they're going to enjoy it. There are some minor gripes that I have with the story, but unfortunately for you, you're going to have to wait and see it for yourself because that would involve some spoilers. But I think overall, the voice acting is really nice. The characters really do portray themselves well. I did take some issue with some of the dialogue throughout the story. They keep using these corny lines that I feel like didn't exist in the base game. For some reason, my character, I've noticed my character and some other characters saying Sitch all the time, like we're Kim Possible. I just don't understand why that became a thing. There's a good segment of the game, there's 10-15 minutes there where they say it 8 times in a row, and it's dude, stop, please. Who says Sitch? I get it. If you say it once in a while, it's fine, but it was just too much. There's another part where your character says Amazeballs, like it's 2002. So I don't know if they had different writers on staff for the DLC or what, but some of the dialogue in that way, a lot of the passive dialogue, the combat dialogue from some of the NPCs just was really annoying, which I don't feel like I noticed in the base game. So I was kind of disappointed by that. One of the good things I will say about this story is that if you're the kind of person who, is going to want to play this again, there is 2 paths that you can take along with a multitude of endings, which will allow for some pretty good replayability. I think a lot of people will want to see what the different outcomes of this are and how it could potentially affect the end of the base game, because as CD Projekt RED has established, this happens before the end of the game, of the base game. Now, I would say take that with a grain of salt, because from what I hear, this DLC does alter some things that happen afterwards in the timeline. So if you're a returning player and you already know some things, I think it's important to keep that in mind so that you don't feel like you're wasting your time when you start the DLC. One of the most difficult things about making this review for the DLC is that I don't want to really talk spoilers at all. And it can be hard to talk about the game without spoiling things, because this is a DLC, because things have taken place before this and will take place after this. There's a lot of things I can't really talk about, But I would say if you like Cyberpunk, if the idea of Cyberpunk is fun to you, the story is good, it is worth visiting. Even the base game, I think, has a phenomenal story. A lot of people said that the story for the base game was not very good, which I just think was a way for them to pile on to the already building hate train for the game. But I think seeing as though a lot of people are coming back around to the game now and realizing that, hey, the story is really good, play the base story, play the DLC. I think they're both worth seeing, to their full potential, and I think you'll have a great time. All right, so now we're going to talk about something where your mileage may vary: graphics. So you can play this game on PS5, Xbox One X, and it did release on PS4 and the Xbox One, which I don't really recommend. You can also buy this game on PC, which is where I play it. You may have a better graphical experience the better your hardware is, right? So if you're playing on PS5 and Xbox One X, I can't speak for it personally, but I've been told that it is very good. However, if you're playing on PC, that's going to be arguably your best experience. When we talk about the graphics, if you look at, all the features that they offer, especially on PC for like ray tracing and things like that, this game is outstanding looking. It is one of the best, absolute best video game visuals of any game ever, period, and it's not even close. Now, the kind of hardware that you need to get it to that point, that's a different story. But you really can't argue with how visually stunning this game is. I mean, especially in the DLC, there are some areas where everything is so densely populated with just, item clutter and things, and in a good way, like it's like a cozy way. When you first make your way into one of the new areas, there's so many people and things, and it just radiates with like energy and life, and the lighting system in the game is just so well done. It is one of my favorite games to just drive around and look at buildings and all that stuff, because there's so much neon and like such contrast between these big skyscrapers that are casting like really dark shadows in alleyways, and all that kind of stuff just compounds into such a phenomenal visual experience. Now, as far as art style and things like that go, in terms of graphics, I think the art style is great. There are some funky things, like I think the way that the kids look in the game are a little odd. They do look like just shrunk down people, which I think initially they were, just shrunk down adults. But I think overall, a lot of that stuff can be looked past. Any open world game, you do expect some level of NPCs to be a little janky at times, which some people may not agree with, but I think if we're being realistic, that is just something that you're going to have to deal with a game that has that many NPCs just running around. It's going to happen. Happens in GTA. If you look at recent releases like Starfield, things like that, it's something that is, I think, probably hard to reel in. But I think overall it doesn't taint the experience. I think visually, you'd be hard-pressed to find a game that looks better than Cyberpunk. So I think that statement alone should tell you all you need to know about how this game looks graphically. All right, so now that we've talked about the graphics, let's go ahead and talk about the sound a little bit. I think overall the sound in Cyberpunk is very good. Like I said, in the story part, some of the dialogue was not my favorite in the DLC, but I think, in terms of like music, the music is so good. Like, music is amazing. The dialogue usually is really good, except for a few hiccups, like I said. One of the things I did notice in this one was I noticed the enemies speaking a lot more than normal, or maybe their dialogue was standing out a little bit more potentially, because they're like kind of they're a bit crass, I would say, in this one. They say some pretty nasty stuff, especially if your character is female. So something to make note of if you guys are playing this. I would not recommend you play this around your children, which you probably already knew. But I think overall, the sound in Phantom Liberty is what you would expect from a game of this caliber. And just as a personal side note, I highly recommend, if you want to hear an awesome song from this game, which is also from the anime, it's called I Really Want to Stay at Your House. I highly suggest you look it up if you don't know of it already, but give it a listen. Alright, so moving into gameplay. Now, this is probably where I'm going to have the most things to say, hopefully. The gameplay in this game is so incredibly good. There are some things that I don't particularly love, like the fact that it's really easy to accidentally dash, and if you create a new character, they'll preset you with like some weapons and some cybernetic stuff, One of those things allows you to get like a really speedy dash. And you just, if you're playing on mouse and keyboard, if you press any direction twice within like a fairly short amount of time, it'll cause you to dash, which is not the hardest thing to accidentally activate, although it can be rebound. On console, that's probably not an issue, but I can't say for sure. The way that they've made the movement more fluid and the way that they've incorporated your cybernetics into that movement is really cool. You know, you could always double jump with certain cybernetics, but basically the pre-built kit, which is what I use to play through the DLC, they give you all the tools to kind of show off the game. And it makes sense that they would do that. And they sort of set up even the beginning of the game to sort of accentuate that and really highlight all the things that they've changed. And I think it works well. Just the moment-to-moment gameplay is really exceptional. The way that you interact with some things, I'm not a super big fan of. There's a particular boss early on in the DLC that has you do sort of like a quick time event where you just kind of like press F to, do whatever interaction. And, that once in a while is fine, but it felt a little bit heavy-handed this time around, and there was something about it that just kind of annoyed me. And some of the bosses are a bit bullet spongy, which is to be expected from this kind of game because the scaling can be weird, and it's a pre-built character that you can start out with, so that may have something to do with it as well. But I would say the way that they've changed the perk system is really where, you're going to see a lot of difference in the game. Like, if you play with Mantis Blades, the fact that you can now dash, like, you can hold down the attack button and dash forward and cut somebody. And that can, like, you can also take a perk so that will reset whenever you've executed somebody with a melee execute and things like that. It's just so fun. It allows you to, like, really build out a character that feels truly unique. Whereas I think a lot of RPG shooters, they struggle to find identity because you're shooting a gun and it's hard to differentiate that. Things like Destiny, I think, do it pretty good. In this game, you really have a lot of options in terms of how you want to approach situations, how you want to approach your questing, how you want to approach your character. I mean, they've added just an enormous amount of new weapons and customizations and cars. Like, when you first get into the new area in the DLC, you find 2 clothing vendors that are, pretty much full up on brand new clothes, which I thought was awesome because personally, I'm about that drip. I gotta look nice. So that was the first thing that I did. So I think people who are into that kind of thing will really enjoy that. And as some of you may know, and some of you may not know, the game has a wardrobe system, so you can make your character look how you want, and it doesn't need to affect your stats, which is one of my favorite features in any game. And I think every game that has an armor system, they need to add this because it's just the best. One of the other things I really like about this game is the fact that when you invest in your character stat-wise, it does give you benefits in the world. So if you're like really good at tech and, you're having a conversation with somebody that involves tech, then you may have certain dialogue options that pertain to that because of your tech skill. Also, if you're really strong, if you have a lot of points in your body skill, you might be able to rip open a door and skip a whole part of a mission or whatever that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. It can also give you access to secret areas and things like that. And that's true for pretty much every stat as far as I can tell. And that was something that was in the base game, but seeing them bring that back and utilizing it here, especially as a DLC that takes place partway through the game. So if you're jumping back in, you've already got some investment. I think it really shines in that system because you're getting to utilize it a lot, which you may not have felt like you got to in the base game. Now, another thing I'd love to touch on is the quick hacking. So there's a system in the game where you hold down shift, I believe it is, and you'll get sort of like technical vision where you can highlight like electronics and you can investigate things. You can get like, when you're looking at people, depending on the eyes that you have installed, you'll be able to tell if they have a bounty, how they died, things like that. So they've overhauled the quick hack system, which is a system where it allows you to learn different quick hacks that you can apply to enemies, to machines, things like that. So you can distract enemies, you can overload a machine or a person, you can overheat their cybernetics. There's a lot of things you can do with it. And they've overhauled that system, which I think is really cool because it was already fun, in my opinion, before. And now I think it's just even better. If you like the idea of being a hacker, I mean, I'm telling you this as from experience. You can sit in a car And you could wipe out a whole building of guys and you don't even have to get out of the car. And nobody will ever know you were there. That is awesome. I've never played a game that lets you do something like that. And I think, those moments where you do that, and it might take you longer, maybe not, honestly, but being able to progress a game like that in such a unique way, I just think is so satisfying. There's something about it that, moments like that is where the game really shows that it is one of a kind. I think it's safe to say over the last few years, CD Projekt Red has put an absolute insane amount of work into this game, getting it to the place where fans wanted it to be, and unfortunately, it wasn't at the time. But I think nowadays, Cyberpunk is an absolute must play. If you can get this game on sale, which it often is, absolutely buy it. Now, your ability to play this game may vary. It is a very long game. At least the base game, about anywhere from 23 to 100 plus hours. Really, it's about what you want to get out of it. If you're the kind of person where you like to have a game that you're going to get a lot of time out of, and you don't necessarily need to sit down for an extended amount of time to have some fun with it, I think Cyberpunk is a great game for you. Ultimately, I think with the changes that they've made and the DLC, my final score for Cyberpunk 2077's Phantom Liberty and the 2.0 overhaul is going to be a 9 out of 10. I think the game has done more than enough to justify such a high score. There are some things that I would like to see tweaked or changed, and to be fair, I think a few of the things that I don't like may just be personal, and some people may enjoy those things, and that's fine. So I think to kind of put a cap on this, if you like the idea of Cyberpunk, if you like the style of Cyberpunk, give this game a shot. And if you're asking yourself, should a dad play? I say absolutely. My name is CJ, and this has been Dad's XP, our review of Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, and we'll see you on the next one.